The marriage contract was just a deal, no love, no strings attached. But when Emily fell for Ryan, it was also when the contract would end. Amid misunderstandings, hurt, and the past resurfacing, could they realize their true love before it was too late? A romance full of emotions and surprises. If you like this content, don't forget to like, share it with your friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more meaningful stories. Ryan Caldwell stood before the large window of his office on the top floor of Caldwell Enterprises. His gaze was sharp and thoughtful as he looked out over the glittering city of New York. The skyscrapers, the bustling crowds, the bright neon lights, all reflected the lavish life he had. But behind this glamorous facade was a man who was cold, detached from the world of emotions. At 32, Ryan was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the United States. Under his leadership, the Caldwell Corporation had continued to grow, expanding into various fields from real estate, finance, to technology. With his handsome features, dark, tousled hair, deep blue eyes, and a tall, imposing figure, Ryan easily attracted attention wherever he went. But what made him stand out even more was his commanding presence and the terrifying coldness he exuded. Ryan didn't believe in love. To him, it was just an emotional game, and in the end, people would be betrayed. The past had taught him a painful lesson. The woman he had once loved deeply betrayed him for a wealthier man. Since then, his heart had frozen. He no longer allowed anyone to enter his world, nor did he believe in sweet promises. But now, Ryan was facing a major issue. His parents, who controlled the corporation, had issued an ultimatum. If he didn't marry before turning 33, he would lose his inheritance. To them, a single man couldn't maintain the stability of a business empire. Ryan hated being forced into anything, but he wasn't foolish enough to lose everything he had built. So he made a decision. If he had to marry, then it would be a transaction, not a love story. He needed a woman who could play the role of his wife for 1 year and then disappear without leaving any emotional attachments. He never expected that the woman would be Emily Dawson. Emily Dawson tightened her thin sweater as the cold wind swept through the crowded street. New York winters were brutal, especially for people like her, the ones who struggled day by day to survive. At 23, Emily had grown accustomed to fighting life on her own. She had grown up in a poor neighborhood, lost her mother at a young age, and her father had left without a word. For years, Emily had only one family member left, her 10-year-old brother, Oliver. Oliver had a congenital heart condition. Taking care of him, paying for hospital bills, and medication had forced Emily to take on multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Currently, she worked as a waitress at a small cafe, earning a meager salary that just covered the basic needs for her and her brother. Every day, Emily smiled at customers, trying to remain optimistic, but deep inside, she knew she was running on empty. Her savings were nothing compared to the upcoming surgery costs for Oliver. If she didn't find a way to make money quickly, she would lose her only family member. Emily didn't believe in miracles, but sometimes fate had its strange ways. And then, she met Ryan Caldwell. That evening, the cafe where Emily worked welcomed a special guest. He was not like the usual customers. He didn't show any sign of rush or fatigue from a long day. He walked in with calm composure, exuding the aura of someone who was used to controlling everything. Ryan Caldwell. Emily didn't know who he was. All she saw was a man with cold eyes and an air of authority. He ordered an espresso, his voice low and firm. Throughout the evening, Ryan observed Emily. It wasn't because she was exceptionally beautiful, although she did have long, shiny brown hair and bright green eyes full of life, but because there was something about her that caught his attention. Her resilience. This girl was clearly going through tough times, yet she kept a smile on her face as she served customers. He noticed the fleeting worry in her eyes every time she checked her phone, perhaps a call from the hospital. A girl like her would have no reason to ask for anything more than money. Ryan set down his coffee cup and straightforwardly spoke. "Do you want to make a lot of money?" Emily was stunned. This offer sounded too strange, especially coming from a stranger. She gave a faint smile. "I'm not that kind of woman." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal or immoral. I just need someone to play the role of my wife for a year." Emily's eyes widened. "Are you joking?" Ryan shook his head. "I'm serious. I'll pay you enough money to change your life. You just need to marry me, live with me for a year. After that, you can leave with the agreed-upon sum." Emily couldn't believe her ears. A year as his fake wife? This sounded more like a movie than real life. She looked him in the eyes, trying to find a sign of a joke. But no, his eyes were cold and resolute, as if this were merely a simple business deal. A year as his wife, and then freedom? A sum of money that could save Oliver's life? Emily knew she couldn't refuse, but she didn't want to become a commodity in this exchange. "I agree, but with one condition." She raised her head high. "There will be no emotional strings between us." Ryan stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. We'll be just a couple on paper." Emily clenched her fists. She had no idea what she was stepping into. All she knew was that her life would never be the same from this moment on. The limousine stopped in front of a large iron gate, opening to a vast estate with a marble-paved walkway. Emily's eyes widened as she took in the sight, overwhelmed by the grandeur of Ryan Caldwell's mansion. This was unlike any house she had ever seen. The towering vaulted ceilings, pristine white walls, and classic Greek columns gave it an air of majestic elegance. The golden lights cast a warm glow on the expansive garden, where carefully pruned flower beds lined the pathways. She gripped her old handbag tightly, feeling a sense of alienation, a loneliness amidst all this opulence. Ryan stepped out of the car, saying nothing, merely signaling for her to follow. She took a deep breath, grabbed her small suitcase, and walked inside. The mansion's interior left her speechless. The floors sparkled under the crystal chandelier, artworks adorned the walls, and the luxurious furnishings made it feel like a royal palace. A middle-aged woman approached, bowing slightly. "Welcome, madam. I'm Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Caldwell's housekeeper." Emily was taken aback by the title, Madam, but quickly realized that, at least for today, she was officially the wife of this man. Ryan didn't bother explaining anything further, simply turning to Mrs. Jenkins. "Show her to her room," he said coldly. Emily watched his tall figure disappear into the study, a silent distance settling between them, as if she were just a stranger living in his house rather than his legal wife. Her bedroom was in a separate wing of the mansion, far from Ryan's. It didn't surprise her. After all, this was just a contractual marriage. She dropped her suitcase and collapsed onto the soft bed. Everything in the room was perfect. Silk bedsheets, pristine white curtains, a classic vanity. But it didn't make her feel comfortable. She thought back to her old, cramped apartment with peeling walls but filled with laughter from her and Oliver. And here, in this extravagant mansion, she felt cold. The next morning, Emily went downstairs for breakfast. Mrs. Jenkins had prepared a lavish spread, but Ryan was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Caldwell left early," Mrs. Jenkins said when she noticed Emily looking around. Although she knew she shouldn't expect anything, Emily couldn't help but feel disappointed. The following days passed in cold detachment. Ryan was rarely home, and when they crossed paths at dinner, he would merely greet her coldly and quickly leave. No casual conversations, no affectionate glances. It was as if she were a ghost existing in his world. Emily didn't care much for him beyond the responsibilities of the contract. She was preoccupied with calls from the hospital, worried about Oliver's health. Still, she couldn't deny that Ryan's coldness sometimes bothered her. Why does he have to be so distant? Ryan's mother's birthday party was held one Saturday evening in a lavish ballroom at a five-star hotel. Emily wore the dark blue gown Mrs. Jenkins had prepared, but she still felt uneasy. Ryan wore a black suit, looking perfect as a Greek god. But even though he stood next to her, the space between them felt like an invisible wall. As soon as they entered the ballroom, curious eyes immediately turned toward them. "Ryan, you finally decided to get married?" A middle-aged man, Ryan's father, Charles Caldwell, smirked. Ryan nodded, placing his arm around Emily's waist, but the gesture was completely devoid of warmth. "Yes, this is Emily, my wife." Emily forced a smile, but the skeptical gazes from those around them were palpable. Ryan's mother, Eleanor, squinted at her. "Interesting. How did the two of you meet?" Emily glanced at Ryan, but he only stared ahead, leaving her to answer on her own. She swallowed. "We met at the cafe where I work. It was a chance encounter." "Really? A cafe girl could win Ryan's heart?" A woman's voice came from behind. Sophia, Ryan's ex-girlfriend. She smirked, her eyes filled with derision. Ryan lightly squeezed Emily's waist, signaling her to stay calm. Emily understood this wasn't just a party. It was a test. If they didn't perform well enough, his family would question everything. Emily took a deep breath and smiled. Sometimes, fate strikes when you least expect it. Her words made Ryan's mother raise an eyebrow, but she said nothing further. That evening, Emily realized something. If she wanted to get through this contract smoothly, she had to learn how to play the perfect wife in front of Ryan's family. But what surprised her the most was Ryan's silence. He didn't react when he was questioned. He didn't defend her when Sophia made snide remarks. He did nothing to help her out of the uncomfortable situation. It seemed that to him, this was all just a performance, and she had to carry the weight of the role herself. What Emily didn't realize was that Ryan was watching her. He noticed how she tried to smile despite being interrogated by his mother. He saw how she stood strong against Sophia, and he saw how she silently endured being ignored by him. Ryan had never trusted women, but Emily was different. She wasn't like the women he had met before. Not greedy, not fake. She was just a girl trying to survive in this world, just like he once had. Though he didn't want to admit it, he started to feel curious about her. And that was when the first cracks in the cold ice between them began to form. Life in the Caldwell mansion slowly became less tense for Emily. At first, she treated the place like an opulent hotel where she was fulfilling a contract. But as days passed, she started to become accustomed to the small things around her. How the sunlight filtered through the large windows in the morning, the familiar scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen, and Ryan's presence. He was still as cold as before, but sometimes she noticed moments when he absent-mindedly watched her. She didn't know when it happened, but dinners together were no longer suffocatingly silent. Sometimes Ryan would ask about Oliver, about what she liked, even about her dreams, questions that took her by surprise because they had nothing to do with the contract. One evening, Emily quietly went down to the kitchen to get some water. She didn't expect to find Ryan there, holding a glass of whiskey, his gaze distant as he looked out the window. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. Ryan turned his head slightly, his deep blue eyes meeting hers. "I don't sleep much." Emily bit her lip, hesitant. This was probably the first time they were near each other without the obvious distance. "So, what do you do at night?" Ryan shrugged. "Work. Or sometimes I just think." She was curious. "Think about what?" He stared at her for a long while, then slowly spoke. "About the things I've lost." His voice was low, tinged with a sorrow that was hard to describe. It was the first time Emily realized that Ryan wasn't an emotionless man. He was just someone who had been hurt too many times. She wanted to ask more, but then fell silent. The silence was no longer uncomfortable, but a quiet moment where both were slowly beginning to understand each other. Emily didn't know that, for some time now, Ryan had begun caring for her in ways even he didn't realize. One day, while she was walking through the mansion's garden, she overheard two maids whispering, "She definitely doesn't deserve Mr. Caldwell." "I think so too. A poor girl like her is just using his money." Emily froze. She hadn't expected the people working in the mansion to have such prejudices against her. She didn't want to care, but she couldn't deny that their words made her feel small and out of place. But before she could react, a cold voice interrupted. "If I hear anyone say anything like that again, you're both out of here immediately." Emily jumped and turned around. Ryan was standing right behind her, his eyes sharp like a knife. The maids turned pale, quickly bowed their heads, and left. Emily looked at Ryan, her heart racing. "You didn't have to do that." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "I don't like people who talk behind others' backs." His words were simple, but they made Emily feel strangely warm. She didn't know if Ryan was protecting her because he cared or just because she was his contract wife. But whatever the reason, she couldn't deny that her heart had started to stir. Things seemed to be changing for the better, until Ryan's past came knocking. That evening, Emily was reading a book in the living room when the door to the mansion opened. A woman walked in, her golden hair shining, her seductive green eyes, and a sharp smile on her lips. Sophia. She wore a red figure-hugging dress, looking perfect like a queen. "Ryan, darling, aren't you going to greet me?" Ryan stood not far away, his face becoming more impassive than ever. "Why are you here?" His voice was cold. Sophia smirked, her eyes briefly scanning Emily as though she didn't even exist. "Of course I'm here to see you. I've made a mistake, and I want to fix it." Emily felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had heard of Sophia, the woman who had betrayed Ryan. But what hurt more was Ryan's expression. He didn't immediately send Sophia away. Even though his eyes betrayed no emotion, his silence was enough for Emily to understand. Sophia still had some place in his heart. She said nothing, silently heading upstairs, trying to suppress the rising emotions inside her. The next day, Emily went to her usual cafe. She needed a place to think, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the mansion. But she never expected Sophia to show up. She sat across from Emily, gently stirring her cappuccino, then smirked. "I know you're just a contract wife." Emily froze. "What are you talking about?" Sophia smiled. "Don't pretend. I know everything. A marriage with an expiration date, a binding contract." She leaned in closer, her voice soft but full of sarcasm. "And you think Ryan will actually love you? Don't be so naive." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Of course she knew that. She had reminded herself countless times that she and Ryan were just in agreement. But why, when hearing it from Sophia, did it hurt so much? She stood up, grabbing her handbag. "I don't think we have anything more to discuss." But as she walked away, Sophia threw out one last remark. "You can leave now, believe me. Ryan won't care." Emily clenched her fists, feeling as though the world was crashing down beneath her. She didn't want to believe those words, but when she thought about how Ryan had remained silent when Sophia appeared, she understood. She was just a substitute, a temporary presence in his life, and maybe it was time for her to leave. That morning, the Caldwell mansion was strangely silent. Ryan walked downstairs to the living room, taking a sip of his coffee as usual. But today, something felt off. There were no soft footsteps of Emily passing through the hallway, no cup of mint tea she usually drank in the morning, no sight of her curled up in the corner of the living room with a book in her hands. She was gone. He furrowed his brow and turned to Mrs. Jenkins. "Where's Emily?" The elderly housekeeper hesitated for a moment before answering. "She's gone, sir." Ryan froze. "Where did she go?" "I'm not sure, but she packed her things and left the mansion early this morning." He slammed the coffee cup down on the table, a tight discomfort gripping his chest. She left without saying a word to him? He immediately called her, but the phone rang and rang with no answer. The entire day he couldn't focus on work. For the first time in his life, he realized he couldn't bear the absence of someone like her. Emily was no longer here, and the mansion, no matter how lavish, felt eerily empty. Ryan drove to Emily's old apartment, but the landlord said she had checked out. He went to the cafe where she used to work, but no one knew where she had gone. He searched everywhere, but it was as if Emily had disappeared from his world. At first, he told himself he didn't care, but the emptiness inside him only grew larger with each passing moment. He missed her smile, missed the way she'd argue with him whenever he said something too rigid, missed the way she'd gently touch her hot tea, her gaze distant as if thinking about something far away. He missed everything about her. And for the first time, Ryan Caldwell, the man who once thought he didn't need love, realized he was wrong. He loved her. And now he had lost her. In another city, Emily sat quietly on the bed, her eyes fixed on the pregnancy test in her hand. 2 lines. She was pregnant. Her heart tightened as she looked at the result. She placed her hand on her belly, where a tiny life was forming. It was Ryan's baby. What should she do now? She knew Ryan didn't love her. He probably only cared for her because of the contract, out of obligation. If he knew she was pregnant, would he accept the baby just because of responsibility? She didn't want that. She didn't want to be seen as just part of an agreement. She loved Ryan. There was no denying that. But she also knew that this love couldn't lead anywhere. She couldn't let her child grow up in a marriage without love. So, she decided to keep this secret to herself. One day, Ryan received a call from the hospital, where Emily often took her brother Oliver for treatment. "Mr. Caldwell, we're calling about Emily Dawson. She was admitted to the hospital a few days ago, but refused to share her information with any family members." Ryan's heart stopped. Emily was in the hospital? Without hesitation, he drove to the hospital immediately. When he entered the room, he saw her lying on the bed, her face pale. But what shocked him more than anything was the ultrasound results on the table. He picked up the paper, his eyes fixed on 2 words. Fetus. 12 weeks. The world seemed to stop. Emily was pregnant with his child? He turned sharply to her, his voice cold but laced with anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily opened her eyes and looked at him tiredly. "Because you didn't need to know." Her words were like a knife to his heart. He clenched the ultrasound paper tightly, struggling to control the emotions rising in his chest. "You think I would abandon my own child?" Emily gave a hollow laugh, her eyes filled with pain. "Ryan, you've never loved me. If I told you, you might accept the baby, but not because of love, but because of responsibility. I don't want that." Ryan froze. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he didn't only care about her because of obligation. But would she believe him? Emily looked him straight in the eye, her voice low but firm. "I'll raise the child on my own. You don't have to do anything." Her words slapped Ryan in the face. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. He didn't want to lose her. He didn't want to lose the baby. But how could he convince her when he had never told her that? He loved her. Ryan couldn't accept the thought of losing Emily. He had once believed his life only needed work and meticulously planned strategies. But now, nothing mattered without her. He didn't care about the contract, didn't care about the clauses that had once bound them. He just wanted Emily. So, he decided to do something he had never imagined himself doing before. That evening, the Caldwell family hosted an important party where the company's major stakeholders were attending. Ryan appeared with a serious expression, but in his mind, he already had a plan. While everyone was chatting, he picked up his wine glass, tapping it lightly to grab their attention. When the room fell silent, he spoke in a deep, authoritative voice. I have an important announcement." All eyes turned toward him. He took a deep breath, then clearly declared, "I'm canceling the marriage contract." The room seemed to explode with shock. Mr. Caldwell, Ryan's father, furrowed his brow. "Ryan, do you know what you're saying? If you cancel the contract, you'll lose the inheritance of the company." Ryan looked straight at his father, his voice unwavering. "I don't care about wealth or power anymore. The only thing I want is Emily, not because of the contract, but because I love her." For the first time in his life, Ryan admitted his feelings in front of everyone. Silence enveloped the room. People whispered and murmured, but Ryan didn't care. He only had one goal: to find the woman he loved. Ryan drove through the night to the place where Emily was living. Standing in front of her small apartment door, he hesitated for a moment. He had never had to beg anyone, never had to fear rejection. But this time, he was willing to do anything to win her back. He knocked on the door. A moment later, the door opened. Emily stood there, her face full of surprise at seeing him. "Ryan?" He didn't wait a second longer. He knelt right at her doorstep and pulled a ring box from his pocket. Emily froze. "What are you doing?" Ryan looked into her eyes, his gaze filled with sincerity. "I married you before because of a contract," he said slowly. "But today, I'm here to propose to you again, this time with no contract, no clauses, no obligations. Just me and my love for you." Emily's heart raced in her chest. Ryan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I made a mistake. I was too scared to admit that I love you. But from the moment you left, I realized that my life would have no meaning without you beside me." He opened the ring box. "Emily Dawson, will you agree to be my wife, for real this time, or not?" Tears welled up at the corners of Emily's eyes. She had dreamed of this moment, but had never dared to think it would actually come true. She looked at Ryan, the man she had loved, even though it all began as a contract. And now, here he was, kneeling before her, not as a cold businessman, but as a man offering her his heart. Emily took a deep breath and nodded softly. "I agree." Ryan immediately stood up and pulled her into a tight embrace. He kissed her deeply, as though to confirm that she truly belonged to him. And this time, there was no contract, no limitations, only love. A few months later, Emily and Ryan officially married, not under a contract, but in a real marriage. The wedding took place in the large garden at the Caldwell mansion, where Emily had once felt out of place, but now it had become her home. As she walked down the aisle, hand in hand with Ryan, she knew she had found the place where she truly belonged. A life no longer bound by terms or obligations, only love, pure, sincere, and eternal. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more meaningful stories.